I want you to imagine, just for a second, that there's a hidden epidemic going on all around us right now. It's not a virus, well, not a physical one anyway, and it's not something you can just spot under a microscope. It's a psychological epidemic, a literal, invisible war for your attention, your resources, and your autonomy. So today we're going completely tactical. We are going to forge your psychological armor step by step to defend against this unseen threat. Okay, let's dive into this. 200. According to research out of Princeton University, the average person faces over 200 manipulation attempts every single week. 200. I mean, think about that. From the sneaky, subtle little UI tricks in the apps we're using every day to the heavy emotional pressure tactics sometimes deployed in our closest relationships, these techniques are absolutely everywhere. And honestly, they're only getting more sophisticated. And the stakes here, they are devastatingly high. Picture this for a second. Your mom calls you in tears. She has just lost her entire retirement savings to what genuinely seemed like a flawless, totally legitimate investment opportunity. The advisor used artificial time pressure, slowly isolated her from the family, and just systematically drained her accounts. She's left not just financially ruined, but deeply, deeply ashamed. Last year alone, Americans lost over $3.5 billion to financial fraud. To put that into perspective, the average elderly victim loses around $120,000, which is often literally their entire life's work.
Have you ever walked away from a conversation or maybe a business transaction feeling like something was just slightly off, but you couldn't really articulate why? Well, that is your gut recognizing invisible manipulation way before your conscious mind can even process it. To pull that intuition up to the surface, we're actually going to rely on a pretty unlikely whistleblower, the 16th century political philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli. He famously wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." Now, I know what you're thinking. When most of us hear the word Machiavellian, we picture this evil genius or a ruthless tyrant. But that kind of misses the point entirely. Living in the absolute political chaos of Renaissance Italy, Machiavelli was essentially a fixer. He wasn't sitting there creating a manual for villains. He was just documenting the raw, unvarnished reality of human self-interest that everyone else was simply too afraid to talk about.
So I want to ask you directly, how many times have you been completely fooled by a carefully crafted image, only to discover the true nature of a person, or maybe a company, way after the damage was already done? Seriously, just take a second to think back on your own past vulnerabilities. And this brilliantly illustrates the point. Just look at Elizabeth Holmes in Theranos. She deliberately put on Steve Jobs' black turtleneck, literally lowered her speaking voice by several octaves, and crafted this whole "I'm changing the world" persona. And it worked. It fooled seasoned investors out of billions for tech that didn't even function. We see the exact same thing with those perfect couples on social media whose relationships are actually incredibly toxic behind closed doors. Or wellness influencers pushing expensive supplements while privately battling massive health issues. Perception management is happening all around us, constantly. Which means transform Machiavelli's dark observations into practical, everyday mental shields that you can literally start using today. Shield number 1 is shifting our focus from trusting promises to recognizing patterns. Machiavelli noted that people are going to say whatever serves them in the moment, right? Manipulators trade in promises. So we need to stop trusting those promises and start relying entirely on pattern recognition. Think about Billy McFarland before the whole Fyre Festival disaster. He already had a clear history of fraudulent businesses. The pattern was staring everyone right in the face. But investors, they were way too focused on his glamorous, shiny promises to see his actual past behavior. So just how effective is this shield? Well, studies show that simply making it a habit to notice behavioral patterns, rather than just listening to promises, reduces your vulnerability to deception by up to 62%. That is a massive upgrade to your psychological defenses just by cataloging what people actually do versus what they say they're going to do. Our next piece of armor contrasts accepting artificial ease with questioning the real price. Look, manipulators deliberately remove friction to lower your defensive instincts. Think about free dating apps for a second. The initial sign-up, it takes seconds. It's incredibly, almost dangerously easy. But the real cost comes later in the form of severe privacy compromises and heavy psychological manipulation designed specifically to keep you scrolling forever. You've got to be highly suspicious when things seem excessively accommodating upfront. To activate the shield, whenever you encounter that zero friction entry, just stop and ask yourself, what's the real price I might pay later? Because truly valuable things rarely come without at least some appropriate level of friction. If it feels way too easy, your psychological armor needs to snap into place immediately. Moving right along to our third shield.
prioritizing boundaries over seeking approval. Machiavelli famously advised that it's safer to be feared than loved. Now, in the context of self-protection, what this really means is that having rock-solid boundaries is a far more reliable safeguard than constantly trying to get everyone to like you. Psychological research actually shows that manipulative people can spot a people pleaser within minutes of meeting them. If you prioritize approval above all else, you are basically painting a giant target on your own back. So, here is a very actionable, tactical defense you can use: the 24-hour rule. Just wait 24 hours before committing to any request if your primary internal motivation is simply to be liked. Just hitting pause gives your rational brain the time it needs to catch up and test your true motives. It stops you from instantly agreeing to favors that end up compromising your boundaries. We have to bring these shields into the digital age because today, manipulators exploit what's called information asymmetry. They'll share seemingly vulnerable but actually super low-stakes information early on just to create this sense of false intimacy. And what does that do? It encourages you to overshare in return. It's a strategic trap. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the real-world application. Think about Mark Zuckerberg allegedly calling early Facebook users dumb for trusting him with their personal data. Social media's entire business model relies on you oversharing while the platform itself remains incredibly secretive. You've absolutely got to guard your personal information strategically. Machiavelli stressed the importance of seeing distant things without having to move. You do this by practicing the "and then what happens" exercise. Think about the timeline of any major choice. When you're faced with a big decision, ask yourself what the consequences are at 6 months, 1 year, and even 5 years out. It's exactly how cigarette companies spot health warnings back in the day. They weren't just fighting a label on a box. They mapped out the timeline and predicted decades of regulatory and cultural shifts. You need that exact same foresight for your own life.
And when you're dealing with the modern internet, you must always ask, who benefits from my outrage here? Platforms love using fake urgency, like Amazon actually getting fined in Italy for using fake countdown timers, and they love outrage amplification because emotional conflict drives engagement. The urgency and the anger, they aren't there to inform you, not at all. They are heavily engineered to manipulate your behavior and boost their ad revenue.
Move to and see how this builds your actual defense strategy. Having forged your mental shields and mapped out the battlefield, how do you actually regain control? Well, when you spot manipulation, you generally have 3 tactical options. 1. Direct confrontation. Just name the tactic right out loud. Say, "Hey, I noticed you using artificial urgency to pressure me right now." 2. Strategic disengagement. Simply walk away from the manipulative environment altogether. Or 3. Boundary reinforcement. This is where you set strict, immovable consequences for their behavior. The beauty is, once you're aware of the manipulation, you suddenly have choices where before you literally had none. So the crucial point is this quote right here: "The wise man does it once, what the fool does finally." The absolute worst thing you can possibly do once you spot manipulation is to just ignore it and hope it magically goes away. It won't. Waiting until the manipulation becomes unbearable only increases the emotional and financial cost to your life. You have to deploy your mental shields immediately. Which leaves us with one final thought to close out this explainer. Will you remain a vulnerable target, or will you use these mental shields to protect yourself and the people you love? Because at the end of the day, true defense isn't about becoming manipulative yourself. It's about using strategic awareness to filter out all that noise so you can build a life of authentic connection rather than one of hidden control.